In 1836, Spain found itself in a unique position. Just a few decades earlier, it had been the largest empire in history. However, following the catastrophic Peninsular War against Napoleon and the ensuing Latin American independence wars led by the likes of Simón Bolívar, Spain had been reduced to a mere rump state, barely holding on to a few far-flung colonies. To make matters worse, its over-reliance on plantation slavery and gold mining in its former colonies had left it underdeveloped compared to its European peers. Could it catch up and once again become a world hegemon, perhaps under a more ordained government? Well, that's what we will find out in this video. Our opening moves will be straightforward. First, we will capitalize on the abundant, high-quality iron available in Navarra by establishing a robust iron and tooling industry. This will serve as the backbone of our industrialization effort. To accelerate our progress further, we aim to pass per capita taxation into law. If successful, it will allow us to expand our budget, enabling us to invest more heavily into industrial growth. Finally, we will focus on establishing Morocco as a protectorate. This move is crucial as it will allow us to secure the territory before any other European powers can claim it. After just narrowly passing per capita taxation into law, a significant opportunity emerged. Sardinia, Piedmont, found itself in the midst of a civil war. By assisting in quelling the rebel aristocrats, they offered to pledge fealty to the Spanish crown. The rebels were of course swiftly defeated, and Sardinia-Piedmont rightfully became a subject of Spain, quickly proving to be a vital revenue stream to fuel the build-up of Spanish industry. Our rapid industrialization quickly shifted the power dynamics of our nation. Liberal-minded factions led by the industrialists, the petit bourgeois, and the clergy began demanding reforms. First, the oligarchical system was abandoned in favor of an elected body of representatives, followed by the abolition of slavery. Suffrage was also soon extended to all literate men. However, our generous reforms were not enough for certain members of the growing radical movements. The petit bourgeois started plotting to overthrow the monarchy and institute a republic. Unable to find support among the liberals, the coup attempt fizzled out, however, and the clergy maintained their role as the leaders of the liberal movement. The new liberal order soon faced a threat, however, from the British, who saw an opportunity to take Morocco from us. Unwilling to accept the demands, war loomed. However, British aggression garnered sympathy through our cause, and soon France joined us to fend off the impending British onslaught. With the odds now in our favor, we took the opportunity to push our claim on Gibraltar. The war brought rising state expenditures, the cost of goods skyrocketed, and taxes were increased. As a result, radical movements became more mainstream, and in an effort to appease them, we pushed for universal suffrage. With French assistance, we managed to push the British out of Gibraltar, although we did accept humiliation in the peace terms, altogether a small price to pay. Universal suffrage was soon adopted, marking the dawn of a new, resurgent liberal Spain. Having re-emerged as a global empire to be reckoned with, our influence began to spread. Portugal turned to us for assistance and was made a protectorate. Reforms were made to open up the Spanish market and liberalize the growing Spanish economy. These reforms were successful. Our economy continued to grow and living standards began to rise. As our factories were sold to the growing upper classes, our deficit turned into a surplus. To further stimulate our economy, we began siphoning more money from our subjects, enabling us to lower taxes. The liberal era brought prosperity to Spain, but as the radical liberal movement began to wane, influential factions argued that the reforms had been too extreme. To safeguard the nation's well-being, they insisted that control should remain in the hands of the well-educated. With rapidly rising living standards and the end of radicalism, the democratic institutions, once hard fought for, were quickly and relatively easily dismantled. Elections were suspended and the parliament dissolved. In its place, a trusted council of academics, engineers and officers were given the reins of power. However, this dream of a technocracy soon encountered issues. While the industrialists and the petit bourgeois were able to abolish universal suffrage and institute a dictatorial council, they lacked the support and legitimacy to lead such a council. Ironically, this reform became their undoing. Instead of leading the council, power was ceded to the much more powerful and popular clergy. Leveraging their new positions of power, their popularity among the common folk, and the general desire for reform, the Church soon began to outmaneuver the other interest groups by advocating for the full abolition of the monarchy and the institution of theocracy. While this change was worrisome to liberals and monarchists, the power vested in the clergy-run council, combined with growing popular support, made all opposition futile. In just a few short years, Spain became a theocracy. The millennia-old monarchical tradition, tracing its origins back to the ancient Kingdom of Asturias, had been abolished. In its place, the Spanish theocracy was formed. While popular support remained high, reforms were necessary to ensure the new state's continued survival. By allowing Isabel de Bourbon to remain the head of the state for the remainder of her life, the monarchist faction lost their leader, while promises to restore universal suffrage satisfied the demands of the working class and liberals. Through clever politicking, the clergy cemented themselves as the leaders of all of Spain, uniting both the poor and the rich, the liberals and the conservatives, the proletariat and the bourgeois. The economy was strong, living standards were decent, and the populace was united. A liberal theocracy had emerged. An oxymoron, perhaps, but a stable one. As Spain re-emerged on the global stage, it only made sense for the nation's resources to be used to restore the traditional order that had existed just a century ago. An expeditionary force, dispatched to Venezuela, quickly brought the republic to its knees. Spain's suzerainty over South America, an issue thought settled decades ago, was once again brought into question. The clergy declared the dissolution of the empire to be the work of heretics and launched an inquisition to root out heresy and restore Spanish imperial order in the Americas. Not everyone welcomed the Spanish ambitions, of course. The US, invoking the Monroe Doctrine, sought to end Spanish encroachment in the Americas. Undeterred, war soon broke out between Spain and the US. Unable to directly defeat the US in land warfare, we used our superior navy to blockade US ports and slowly weaken their economy. After a 4-year blockade, the US defaulted on its debt, allowing us to land in DC and force their surrender. The following war reparations were useful in repaying our debts, while the US faced a runaway economic collapse. Just barely having recovered from the last war, the British once again made a play for Morocco. Though we were stronger this time, so were they. Unwilling to accept France's demands for help, we were instead joined by rebellious Canada and a power-hungry Austria-Hungary. While decently strong, this coalition was not enough to fend off the British forces. They soon made landfall and pushed our forces out of Morocco. The conflict soon reached Spain itself, and the situation looked increasingly bleak. However, as the British were locked in brutal battles in Gibraltar, a small Spanish contingent in West Sahara managed to liberate Morocco. The war soon turned in our favor and the British, albeit with some minor concessions, accepted peace. With the Americans still reeling from the last war and British defeated twice, nothing stood in the way of the imperial ambitions of the Spanish theocracy. In just a few short years, Peru, Bolivia, Argentina, Ecuador, Chile, Colombia, and Central America were all made protectorates of Spain and forcefully turned into subjects of the Inquisition. If only South America had stood united against such a threat. But well, that's next video. Don't forget to subscribe. As Spanish supremacy became apparent, the theocracy's fears shifted from external threats to internal ones. Communist revolutions, first in America and then in France, proved that the reigning social order could be upended. At first, welfare reforms, granting increased workers' rights and pensions, were meant to address the concerns of the lower classes and thus prevent an escalation of class conflict. However, these reforms were deemed insufficient, and harsher measures were soon implemented. The days of the liberal theocracy was coming to an end. A curtailment of freedom of speech and the establishment of a secret police were the first steps. Elections were still theoretically free and open, but with living standards as high as ever, the populace was relatively accepting of the end of democracy. Those who opposed it had little recourse. As a result, the increasingly totalitarian clergy secured another electoral landslide. And when a law proposing the banning of all opposition parties was introduced, it faced little resistance. In 1919, all parties except the clergy-controlled traditionalist communion were outlawed. A totalitarian dictatorship was now a reality. Still, the populace had to be kept content, and so the structure of our economy changed, particularly in the terms of our relations with the recovered South American colonies. Until now, they had remained relatively autonomous, propped up by generous Spanish subsidies. Now, both money and raw resources would be extracted to the Spanish mainland. The colonies were bled dry, while mainlanders enjoyed enormous social benefits and low taxes. We had, in every sense, built ourselves a colonial empire. But we had also recreated a system not too dissimilar to Immanuel Wallerstein's world systems theory, which posits that the perpetuation of the capitalist system throughout the world has created a system where wealth, in the form of raw goods, flow from the periphery to the richer core. Raw goods are cheaply purchased and processed into much more profitable end products, primarily benefiting the richer core, in this case Spain. Of course, our puppets saw some benefits from this system, but with many of the profitable industries in Latin America now owned by Spanish capitalists, much of the profit was siphoned off to Spain. For now, in-game, such a system works excellently for propping up a totalitarian state like the one we built. But if we were to do a thought experiment, would it be sustainable? Probably not. The whole system is built on the subordination of half a continent by a relatively small peninsula. In-game, we were fighting and crushing rebellions in Latin America almost every other year. With near zero oversight in colonies, our reckless exploitation would only encourage more people to revolt. And combined with the harsh environments of South America, it would be difficult to stop insurgencies, as they could simply retreat into the remote rainforests of the Amazon or the desolate hills of the Andes. The colonies would eventually break free, and as they leave our sphere of influence, our industries would grind to a halt, and our generous welfare system would collapse. Would our regime survive such a scenario? I don't see it as likely, but for now we're the number one great power, and that is all that matters, right?